2 minutes. That's all it took for the internet to explode and for Angel Reese's world to tilt off its axis. ESPN dropped one list, one number, one ranking, and suddenly the illusion shattered. Not top 5. Not top 10. Number 12. And in that moment, the silence around Angel Reese was louder than any trash talk she's ever delivered. No caption, no clapback, no emoji. Just a storm brewing behind the scenes that insiders say was pure rage, disbelief, and panic colliding all at once. Because this wasn't just a ranking. This was a message. A cold, calculated reminder that branding doesn't equal dominance, and hype doesn't guarantee respect. After all the magazine covers, the fashion moments, the viral sound bites, ES still looked at Angel Reese and said, "You're not who you think you are." And that cut deeper than any hard foul ever could. What made it worse? The names around her. Legends, champions, finals MVPs, players who built careers on winning, not trending. And suddenly, fans weren't just questioning why Angel was ranked low, they were questioning why she was ranked that high at all. The comments turned savage. The debates turned toxic. And the comparisons. Brutal, because while Angel Reese was spiraling over a list, Caitlin Clark was nowhere to be found. Except in the gym. Sources say Angel saw the ranking late at night, phone in hand, jaw tight, eyes locked. And one line kept replaying in her head over and over again. "After everything I've done. This is it." But what happened next is where this story really turns dark. Angel Reese didn't wake up as a villain in this story. She was built into one, layer by layer, moment by moment, under lights that never turn off. From the second she stepped into the national spotlight, she wasn't just playing basketball, she was carrying a persona. The confidence, the bravado, the unapologetic energy that made fans either worship her or wait for her downfall. There was never any middle ground. And Angel leaned into that chaos, believing the louder she became, the more untouchable she'd be. Her rise felt inevitable. College dominance. Viral moments. Headlines that followed her everywhere. She wasn't just winning games, she was winning attention. And in a league starving for eyes, that attention felt like power. Angels started to believe that visibility meant value, that being talked about meant being feared, that controversy meant control. Every camera flash reinforced the idea that she was the center of the universe, or at least the conversation. But behind the scenes, pressure was building. Expectations started to suffocate. Every rebound was scrutinized. Every missed layup replayed. Every technical foul dissected like evidence in a trial. Angel wasn't just competing against opponents anymore. She was competing against the version of herself the internet had inflated. And that version never missed. Never struggled. Never ranked 12th. There were whispers long before ESPN's list dropped. Coaches quietly questioning fit. Analysts circling efficiency numbers. Fans arguing whether her impact translated to winning or just noise. Angel heard it all. She always did. And instead of shutting it out, she absorbed it, internalized it, and turned it into fuel. Or at least that's what she told herself. The comparisons didn't help. They never do. Caitlin Clark became the measuring stick no one asked for but everyone used. One praised for silence and grind. The other scrutinized for confidence and flair. One labeled pure hooper. The other labeled brand first. And every time Angel scrolled, the gap felt wider. Not in talent, but in perception. And perception, in this league, can end careers before injuries ever do. Angel wanted respect without compromise. She wanted to be celebrated on her terms. But the league doesn't run on feelings, and ESPN doesn't rank based on vibes. When the list came out, it didn't just reflect performance, it reflected doubt. Doubt about her efficiency. Doubt about her impact. Doubt about whether the noise outweighed the substance. That's why this hurt so badly. Because deep down, Angel Reese knew this wasn't coming from haters alone. This was coming from inside the basketball world she wanted to dominate, the same world she believed she had already conquered. And when that realization finally settled in, when the anger faded just enough for clarity to creep through, something inside her snapped. Because the real question wasn't why ESPN ranked her 12th, it was who else had already stopped believing. The real explosion didn't happen on social media. It happened behind closed doors, in group chats that suddenly went silent and phone calls that went unanswered. Because within hours of ESPN's rankings going live, something shifted. Insiders say Angel Reese didn't just feel disrespected, she felt exposed. The list didn't just rank her, it stripped away the protection she thought her name guaranteed. And once that protection vanished, everything she'd been holding together started to unravel fast. According to multiple league sources, Angel immediately reached out to people she trusted, demanding to know who pushed this narrative, who talked, who voted, who decided she wasn't top tier anymore. And the answers she got were not what she expected, because it wasn't one analyst, it wasn't one hater. It was a consensus forming quietly, steadily for months. Coaches, executives, media voices, all circling the same uncomfortable conclusion. Angel Reese's impact wasn't matching the noise around her. That's when the first twist hit. A leaked conversation began circulating among insiders, allegedly tied to a fantasy ranking panel discussion. One line stood out like a knife. If this was about winning, she wouldn't be this high. That sentence detonated everything, because fantasy rankings are supposed to reward production. But even there, the argument wasn't flattering. Stat heavy, efficiency light, rebounds inflated, scoring inconsistent, defensive value questioned. And suddenly, the narrative flipped. The outrage wasn't that Angel Reese was ranked too low. It was that she was ranked too high. The internet smelled blood. Fans started digging. Clips resurfaced. Missed layups, forced shots, technical fouls, turnovers at the worst moments. Every flaw magnified, slowed down, replayed with captions dripping in sarcasm. And while Angel Reese stayed quiet publicly, insiders say she was spiraling privately. Texts fired off. Meetings requested. Calls ignored. Because here's the part nobody talks about. Rankings don't exist in a vacuum. They influence rotations, endorsements, trade value, perception, and perception was turning poisonous. The comparisons got cruel. Caitlin Clark's name kept popping up, not because Angel mentioned her but because everyone else did, one grinding in silence, the other trending in chaos, one praised for elevating teammates, the other criticized for chasing moments. And whether fair or not, that contrast started to define Angel's season before it even began. Then came the second blow. The one that turned frustration into panic. Sources close to the situation say at least 2 teams quietly removed Angel Reese from internal future cornerstone lists after the rankings dropped. Not publicly, not officially, but internally. The language changed. Jaime, brand risk, needs the ball. Words that don't kill careers outright, but slowly suffocate them. Angel felt it. The energy, the hesitation. The way conversations suddenly felt transactional instead of supportive. And when she finally broke her silence with a vague post, no names, no explanations, just frustration, it only fueled the fire. Critics called it deflection. Fans called it insecurity. And the league. The league kept watching, because the biggest shock wasn't ESPN's ranking, it was the realization that this list didn't start the doubt, it confirmed it. And as Angel Reese stared down the reality that her reputation was slipping faster than she could control it, one terrifying question loomed over everything. What happens if this isn't a slump, but a turning point? By the next morning, the fallout had escalated, from whispers to wildfire. Sports talk shows opened with Angel Reese's name in bold letters. Podcasts clipped her stat lines apart frame by frame. Fantasy analysts stopped dancing around it and said the quiet part out loud. That ranking wasn't an insult, it was a warning. And the league noticed how fast the tone shifted from debate to doubt. Behind the scenes, the pressure tightened. Sponsorship conversations stalled. One marketing executive reportedly asked a brutal question in a closed meeting: is the controversy still worth the return? That single sentence changed everything, because Angel's brand had always thrived on being polarizing. Love her or hate her, you talked about her. But now the narrative was mutating. This wasn't passion versus hate anymore. It was reliability versus risk. Then came the second major twist. A respected former player, someone Angel had once praised publicly, went on air and calmly dismantled the hype. No yelling, no theatrics, just cold analysis. She questioned efficiency, shot selection, defensive positioning. And then she said it at some point, production has to outweigh persona. The clip went viral within minutes. Fans clipped it, analysts reposted it. And suddenly, Angel Reese wasn't fighting trolls anymore. She was fighting credibility. Social media turned into a battleground. Supporters accused ESPN of bias. Critics accused Angel of entitlement. Old college clips resurfaced. New WNBA film followed. Every rebound debated. Every miss weaponized. And through it all, Angel's silence became its own storyline. People weren't asking what she thought anymore. They were asking why she hadn't answered. Sources say that's when the panic really set in. Because internally, Angel knew this wasn't about fantasy rankings. It was about leverage. Rankings influence narratives. Narratives influence trust. And trust dictates who gets built around and who gets moved. One front office insider reportedly said, "If this was any other player, we'd be calling it a wake-up year." That phrase spread quietly through league circles. Wake-up year, not breakout, not growth. Survival, and then the locker room tension leaked. A teammate liked a post criticizing Angel's ranking. Another followed an account openly mocking the list. It wasn't loud, it wasn't direct, but it was enough. Enough to signal that the cracks weren't just external anymore. Angel felt isolated, cornered between defending herself and saying too much. Every move risked making it worse. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's shadow kept growing. Not because she said anything, but because she didn't. No statements, just gym footage. Work, reps. And that contrast burned. Because silence, in this moment, looked like strength. Angel finally broke with a short, cryptic response. Not an explanation, not an apology, just frustration. And instead of calming the storm, it detonated it. Analysts called it deflection. Fans called it denial. Even neutral observers started asking if Angel was hearing the message, or fighting it. Because here's the truth, nobody wanted to say out loud, rankings don't end careers, reactions do. And as the noise reached a deafening pitch, as every eye stayed locked on Angel Reese, waiting for her next move, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't about being number 12. This was about whether Angel Reese could adapt before the league decided to move on without her. By the end of the week, the damage wasn't theoretical anymore. It was emotional, it was public, and it was everywhere. Fans weren't just debating Angel Reese, they were choosing sides like this was a civil war inside the league. Timelines split in half. Comment sections turned vicious. Some called her misunderstood, others called her overrated. And in the middle of it all was a player watching her image fracture in real time with no way to stop it. Former players weighed in. And that's when it really hurt. Not the trolls, not the anonymous accounts. The voices Angel grew up respecting, the ones who knew what it took to last in this league. One said she needed to fall in love with the grind again. Another hinted that the league humbles everyone eventually. None of them said her name outright. They didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. The fan reaction turned personal. Supporters accused ESPN of targeting her confidence. Critics accused her of hiding behind branding. Every clip became evidence. Every stat became ammunition. Her rebounds were called empty. Her points were called inefficient. Her defense was called optional. And worst of all, the narrative hardened into something dangerous, that Angel Reese cared more about being seen than about being better. Inside locker rooms around the league, the conversations were uncomfortable. Players whispered about chemistry, about distractions, about whether they'd want to play next to someone constantly under a microscope. And once that question starts getting asked, it never fully goes away. Because teams don't just evaluate talent, they evaluate peace. Angel's social media presence only made things more volatile. Every post was dissected, every like scrutinized. Silence was interpreted as guilt. Words were interpreted as weakness. There was no safe move left, and the emotional toll started to show. Insiders described her as tense, defensive, frustrated, a competitor who felt betrayed by the same ecosystem she helped energize. The comparison machine kept grinding. Caitlin Clark's name became unavoidable, not because she demanded it, but because she embodied the opposite of the chaos: calm, consistent, focused. Fans used her as a contrast point in every argument. This is how you respond. This is what leadership looks like. Fair or not, Angel Reese was losing that comparison battle by doing nothing at all. League executives noticed the shift too. One anonymous source described it as narrative fatigue, not hatred, exhaustion. And that's more dangerous, because hate still means relevance. Fatigue means people are ready to move on, ready to find the next face, the next story, the next savior. Angel Reese wasn't just fighting critics anymore. She was fighting momentum, and momentum had turned against her fast at one point. A respected analyst said something that sent chills through fan bases on both sides. If she doesn't reset soon, this becomes who she is. Not a phase, not a storm, a label. And labels in this league stick. As the emotional fallout continued to spread, as Angel Reese stood at the center of a narrative she could no longer control, one haunting reality began to take shape. This wasn't just about how the public saw her. It was about how the league was starting to define her and whether there was still time to change it. long before ESPN ever dropped a ranking, long before the internet decided to put a number next to her name, Angel Reese was already living inside pressure. From the moment she became a national figure in college, everything about her was amplified. The confidence, the celebrations, the unapologetic swagger. She wasn't just playing basketball, she was challenging how a star was supposed to look, speak, and move. And that made her powerful, but it also made her polarizing. Angel came into the league, carrying expectations heavier than most rookies ever face. She wasn't marketed as a project, she was marketed as a movement. Brands followed her before defenses did. Cameras followed her everywhere. Every rebound, every glare, every quote became content. And while some players grow quietly into the league, Angel Reese arrived loudly. Already labeled as a face, a personality, a lightning rod. That kind of attention doesn't just lift you, it tightens around you. Inside the locker room, the transition wasn't simple. The WNBA isn't college. Respect isn't given because of hype. It's earned through consistency, sacrifice, and trust. Veterans watch everything. How you respond to adversity, how you talk about teammates, how you show up when you're not the star of the night. Angel was still learning that balance while the world was already judging whether she had it at the same time. The comparisons started early and never stopped. Caitlin Clark, Paige Buchanan. Other young stars were framed as pure hoopas, while Angel was framed as something else: emotion, branding, controversy. That framing stuck, even when the numbers said she was productive. Double-doubles turned into accusations of hustle turned into jokes. Passion turned into too much. Every strength was flipped into a flaw depending on who was watching. Angel felt that. You could hear it in her interviews. The edge, the defensiveness, the constant need to remind people she belonged. She talked about respect because she felt a lack of it. She talked about winning because she felt the doubt. And the more she spoke, the more the narrative hardened against her. Not because she was wrong to speak, but because in this league, silence is often mistaken for maturity. Then came the branding era in full force. Fashion weeks, endorsements, visibility beyond basketball. For some, it was empowering. For others, it confirmed their worst assumptions. That Angel cared more about image than improvement. Fair or not, that story gained traction, especially when her on-court growth didn't silence it immediately. Injuries didn't help, neither did inconsistency. Every missed game became a question mark. Every absence became speculation. And instead of sympathy, the response was skepticism. Because when you're loud on the way up, people expect perfection on the way through. There's no grace period, no patience, just judgment. By the time ESPN released its rankings, this wasn't just about performance anymore. It was emotional history colliding with public perception. Years of build-up, celebration, backlash, and expectation condensed into one number. A number that didn't just rank Angel Reese. It triggered every unresolved conversation about who she is, who she's supposed to be, and whether the league still believes in the version of her that was promised. And that's what made what came next so explosive. Because the ranking wasn't the spark. It was the match dropped onto a pile of resentment that had been building for years. The moment ESPN's list went live, everything detonated at once. Phones buzzed, group chats exploded, and inside league circles, one name started moving faster than the ranking itself: Angel Reese. Sources say she saw the list within minutes, not from ESPN, not from an agent, from social media, from a flood of tags, DMs, laughing emojis, and screenshots sent with captions like "you seeing this? And they really did you dirty." That's when the shift happened. Because at first, the reaction wasn't public. It was raw. People close to Angel say she went silent, the dangerous kind of silent. No posts, no stories, no likes. Just hours of nothing while the narrative ran wild without her. And in this league, silence doesn't protect you. It invites interpretation. By the time she finally reacted, the story had already grown teeth. The ranking itself was brutal in context. Not top 10. Not even close. Number 12. A spot that felt intentional. High enough to spark debate. Low enough to sting. And worse. The names around her lit the fuse. Veterans, champions, finals MVPs, players who had already proven themselves at the highest level. Fans didn't just question why Angel was ranked low, they questioned why she was ranked above anyone at all. That's when the tone shifted from critique to humiliation. Then came the first twist. A leaked clip began circulating, allegedly from a private conversation where Angel reacted to the ranking. The audio was grainy, the words clipped, but the emotion was unmistakable. Frustration, disbelief, anger. At one point, a voice believed to be hers snapped, "After everything I've done." That one sentence changed everything. Because it wasn't denial. It wasn't motivation. It sounded like entitlement, and the internet smelled blood. ESPN analysts fanned the flames without saying her name. Production versus impact. Fantasy stats versus winning. Brand doesn't equal basketball. Each phrase felt like it was aimed directly at her. Clips were spliced with missed layups replayed next to the ranking graphic. Turnovers slowed down for emphasis. The narrative hardened fast that ESPN hadn't disrespected her. They'd exposed her. Inside Chicago, the timing couldn't have been worse. Team sources hinted that frustration had already been brewing. Chemistry questions, availability questions, leadership questions. And now this. One staffer reportedly said the ranking matched internal conversations. That single leak sent shockwaves, because it suggested the criticism wasn't just coming from fans or media, it was coming from her own house. Angel's response finally came, and it landed like gasoline on a fire. Not a statement, not an explanation, just a cryptic post. One line. No context. Numbers don't tell the whole story. Within minutes, it was raged. Critics flooded the replies with screenshots, advanced metrics, and sarcasm. Supporters defended her fiercely, but the divide was unmistakable. There was no middle ground anymore. Then the second shoe dropped. A prominent reporter hinted on air that multiple teams are monitoring the situation closely. Not trades, not interest. Monitoring. The kind of word executives use when they're evaluating risk. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about rankings. It was about future, about reputation, about whether Angel Reese was becoming more complicated than valuable. Comparisons poured in relentlessly. Caitlin Clark's name trended alongside hers again, not because Clark said anything, but because she didn't. While Angel was fighting perception, Clark was in the gym. That contrast became the loudest statement of all. Fans framed it as effort versus energy, substance versus noise. Fair or not, it stuck. The twist wasn't that Angel Reese was ranked 12. The twist was that the ranking exposed how thin the margin had become between star and spectacle. And as the backlash intensified, one question began echoing across the league, whispered in front offices and screamed online. Was this just a bad week or the beginning of a collapse no one could stop? What happened next is where the situation crossed a line from controversy into full-blown crisis mode. Because once the ranking backlash peaked, the league itself started reacting in ways nobody expected, quietly at first. Then, unmistakably, executives stopped laughing it off. Media partners stopped defending it. And suddenly, Angel Reese wasn't just trending, she was being evaluated. The second major twist came from behind the scenes. Multiple insiders began leaking the same unsettling detail. ESPN's ranking wasn't an outlier. It was aligned with how several front offices currently viewed her, not as a star cornerstone, not as untouchable, but as volatile value. A phrase that sent shockwaves when it surfaced. Volatile value means talent mixed with risk, marketability mixed with instability, and once that label gets attached, it spreads fast. Then came the scheduling whispers. People noticed something strange. Promotional pushes shifted. National broadcasts stopped centering around her matchups. Social media graphics quietly pivoted toward other young stars. Caitlin Clark, Paige Buchanan, Aja Wilson, Aaliyah Boston. Angel wasn't erased, but she wasn't elevated either. She was paused. And for someone built on momentum, a pause is deadly. Her inner circle felt it immediately. One source claimed Angel was furious but cornered. Another said she felt blindsided, convinced the league was benefiting from her image while refusing to fully back her. That belief fueled her anger, but it also clouded her judgment, because instead of resetting, she doubled down emotionally. Subtle likes, deleted posts, unfollow rumors. Every digital move became another headline. Every reaction fed the machine she was trying to escape. Then the leak that truly escalated everything hit. A report surfaced suggesting that ESPN had debated ranking her even lower, but stopped due to backlash concerns. That revelation flipped the narrative on its head. Suddenly, the ranking wasn't disrespectful, it was merciful. And fans turned vicious. They protected her. They boosted her. This is favoritism. The humiliation deepened, because now, even the number 12 looked inflated. Inside Chicago, the tension reached a boiling point. Team officials reportedly held internal meetings about messaging, not about basketball, about optics, about damage control, about how to move forward with a player whose public perception was spiraling. One staffer allegedly asked a brutal question: Are we building around her or around surviving her? That question alone revealed how far things had gone. Angel felt the shift. You could see it in her body language, in her interviews, short answers, defensive tone, eyes scanning the room instead of locking in. The confidence that once felt fearless now felt fragile. And the league noticed, because confidence is magnetic when it's steady but uncomfortable. When it's erratic, the internet poured gasoline on everything. Fan edits compared her ranking to turnovers, 2 missed layups, 2 defensive lapses. Advanced analytics were weaponized. Memes exploded. And worse, former supporters began to disengage. Not attack, disengage. That's when the tone truly changed. When people stopped arguing for her and started shrugging. Meanwhile, the contrast became unavoidable. Caitlin Clark's off-season clips surfaced daily. Quiet workouts, focused reps, no commentary, no response. Just work. Analysts praised her professional silence. They framed it as maturity, as evolution. Every compliment toward Clark felt like an indirect indictment of Angel. Not because Clark said anything, but because Angel did. Then came the final escalation of the week. A respected league insider hinted that one player's ranking reaction has raised internal red flags. No name, no denial. The message was clear. Emotional volatility wasn't being ignored. It was being logged, documented, remembered. And that's when the question shifted again. Not is Angel Reese underrated? Not was ESPN unfair? But something far more dangerous is the league losing patience with her. Because once patience runs out, narratives harden into decisions. And decisions don't trend, they happen quietly, behind closed doors, long before the public realizes what's coming. Angel Reese was no longer fighting a ranking was fighting perception at the highest level, and the next twist wasn't going to come from ESPN. It was going to come from the league itself. By the time the public fallout fully set in, there was no controlling it anymore. The conversation had escaped basketball and turned into a referendum on Angel Reese herself. Not just the player, the person, the brand, the symbol. Fans weren't debating her pick-and-roll reads or footwork anymore. They were debating her character. And once that door opens, it never shuts quietly. Social media became a war zone. Angel Reese's name trended for days straight, but the tone had changed. This wasn't hype. This wasn't rivalry. This was interrogation. Clips of her games were slowed down, annotated, dissected frame by frame. Empty rebounds. Forced shots. No bag. Accounts that once defended her went silent or switched sides. Even neutral fans started asking uncomfortable questions. If she's really elite, why does this keep happening? The emotional backlash was brutal. Former supporters accused ESPN of protecting her. Critics accused the league of pushing a manufactured star. And right in the middle were younger fans who felt betrayed, not because she ranked 12th, but because she reacted like it was an insult. Great players don't panic. One viral post read, "They respond." That line alone was reposted tens of thousands of times. Inside the locker rooms around the league, the chatter turned uneasy. Players didn't blast her publicly, but the body language told the story. Subtle comments in interviews, side glances when her name came up. One veteran said, "This league is small. Everybody's watching how you handle moments like this." It wasn't shade. It was a warning. Then came the emotional fracture that nobody expected. Angel's fan base split. Hard. One side doubled down, insisting she was being targeted, disrespected, sabotaged. The other side started holding her accountable, questioning why she always seemed to be at the center of drama instead of growth. When your own supporters stop agreeing on how to defend you, the foundation starts cracking. Angel herself didn't look untouched by it. Sources close to her described mood swings, long nights, frustration, a sense of being misunderstood but also cornered. Every move felt like a trap. Post too much, you're insecure. Stay silent, you're guilty. Work out privately, people say you're hiding. Post workouts, people say it's performative. There was no winning the optics game anymore. Meanwhile, ESPN quietly moved on. New segments, new debates, new stars. The cycle rolled forward without waiting for her to catch up. That was the most painful part. Not the criticism, the indifference. When the machine stops centering you, it's not because you're hated, it's because you're replaceable. Stops centering you, it's not because you're hated, it's because you're replaceable. Comparisons intensified again. And this time they felt final. Caitlin Clark, Paige Buch, Alia Boston. Players being praised, not just for stats, but for stability, for focus, for letting their game do the talking. Analysts framed it as trust. Coaches trust them. Teammates trust them. Front offices trust them. And once that word entered the conversation, Angel Reese's absence from it was deafening. The emotional toll showed up in subtle ways: a forced smile here, a clipped answer there, a visible pause before responding to questions that used to roll off her tongue. Confidence doesn't disappear overnight, it erodes, and erosion is harder to reverse than a slump. Then the league reaction hardened. Not publicly, quietly. Invitations slowed, feature pieces cooled, conversations shifted to fit instead of future. That's when insiders started using a phrase that felt like a death sentence to momentum: wait and see. When the league decides to wait on you, it means they're not betting on you anymore. Angel Reese wasn't canceled, she wasn't erased, she was being reconsidered. And that's the most dangerous place an athlete can land, suspended between relevance and regret, between promise and proof. Because as the emotional fallout spread and the noise began to fade, one final question started haunting everyone watching closely. When the spotlight finally moves on, will Angel Reese be ready for what comes after? Or will this moment define her forever, just when it felt like the storm had peaked? The final twist landed, and it didn't come from ESPN, social media, or even the fans. It came from silence. The kind of silence that only shows up when decisions are already being made behind closed doors. No statements, no defenses, no league officials rushing to calm the narrative. And that's when the most unsettling realization hit. Angel Reese wasn't being attacked anymore, she was being assessed. Multiple insiders began hinting at something far more serious than rankings or backlash. A reset, not a punishment, not a demotion, a recalibration of how the league viewed her role going forward. One source described it as a crossroads moment. Another used an even colder phrase: career-defining window. The implication was clear: the league wasn't done with Angel Reese, but it wasn't waiting on her either. Then came the detail that made everything feel irreversible: a quiet shift in how her name was used internally. No longer paired with face of the league. No longer mentioned as a guaranteed marketing anchor. Instead, words like potential, if, and depending on growth began surfacing. Those words might sound harmless, but in professional sports, they're devastating. They mean belief has turned conditional. Angel felt it. People close to her say the frustration wasn't just anger anymore. It was fear. Fear that everything she built could slip away, not because she wasn't talented, but because she couldn't escape the noise surrounding her. Fear that the league was moving on to stars who made fewer waves and fewer headlines. Fear that the conversation had shifted from what she could become to whether she was worth the effort. The most chilling moment came when a respected former executive said on a podcast, "This is the part where great players decide who they really are." That wasn't analysis. It was a warning. Because this league doesn't wait forever. It doesn't rescue narratives. It rewards evolution and punishes stagnation. Angel Reese now stands at a fork in the road. One path leads to reinvention, silence, work, growth, letting the game do the talking. The other leads to resistance, defensiveness, becoming trapped inside a version of herself the public already thinks it understands. Both paths are brutal. Only one leads forward. The comparisons haven't stopped, but they've changed tone. Caitlin Clark isn't used as a rival anymore. She's used as a benchmark, not for talent, but for trust. And trust is the currency Angel now lacks. Not because she can't play, but because too many people aren't sure what comes with her anymore. Here's the part no one wants to say out loud. This moment could either harden Angel Reese into exactly what critics claim she is, or it could break her open into something undeniable. There's no middle ground left. The league has seen enough to decide it's time for answers, not explanations. And the scariest part, the next move is hers, but the consequences won't be. Because if Angel Reese doesn't rewrite this story herself, someone else already will. And when that happens, no ranking, no apology, and no brand deal will be able to change how history remembers this moment. This wasn't just about being ranked too low. This was the moment the league quietly asked one question: who are you really going to be? And now it's on you, because moments like this don't just shape players, they expose how fans see the game. Was this ESPN ranking a long overdue reality check? Or did it cross a line into outright disrespect? Is Angel Reese being unfairly targeted for her personality and confidence? Or is she paying the price for choices that finally caught up to her? There is no neutral ground here, and that's why this story matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Should Angel Reese stay quiet, lock in, and reinvent herself, or should she clap back and fight the narrative head-on? Did ESPN humiliate her? Or did they tell an uncomfortable truth no one wanted to hear? And here's the big one nobody agrees on. Is this just a bad moment? Or the turning point that defines her entire career? If you're rocking with Angel, say it loud. If you think the league is moving on, explain why. Debate it out respectfully or not. Because this conversation is far from over. Make sure you like this video if you felt the tension. Subscribe if you want real, unfiltered WNBA drama that doesn't duck the hard conversations. And turn on notifications, because the next update in this saga could drop at any moment, a statement, a trade rumor, or a response that flips everything again. This story isn't done. And neither is Angel Reese.